She never understood him, not when he came home late, not when he sat quietly at the dinner table, not when he said, "I'm just tired." To her, it always felt like excuses, like he didn't care enough, like he wasn't giving his best. But the truth was, he was giving more than she ever saw. David had always been a man of quiet endurance. Each morning before the sun rose, he rose as well, careful not to disturb the soft rhythm of the house. He brewed bitter coffee, sharpened his mind for the day's challenges, and left the home with an invisible weight on his shoulders. Bills, work demands, and obligations, both spoken and unspoken, clung to him like shadows, yet he bore them without complaint, preferring silence to explanation. Clara, his wife, rarely noticed these sacrifices. Her eyes saw only what was obvious: his fatigue, his quiet demeanor, his inability to be present in the way she expected. To her, love was measured in attention, in verbal affirmations, in shared laughter at the dinner table. She did not see the silent battles David fought each day. She did not see the nights he stayed awake to balance accounts, or the meetings he endured long past exhaustion. Dinner was often a tense affair. Clara asked questions, expecting warmth and engagement, but received only curt responses. "I'm fine, just tired. It's nothing," phrases meant to reassure, but received by her as indifference. Her sighs and sideways glances cut deeper than any words he might have spoken. Yet David never wavered. He understood the silent, unspoken language of care. While Clara measured love in immediate gestures, he measured it in enduring effort, in quiet constancy. Every day, he performed his act of devotion invisibly, knowing it would one day form the invisible scaffolding of their life together. One evening, Clara's frustration bubbled over. "David, do you even notice? Notice how late you are? How distant?" He looked up, eyes weary yet patient. "I notice," he said simply. "I notice everything." She shook her head, disbelief painted across her face. "If you notice, why does it feel like you don't care?" He wanted to explain, to reveal the endless hours of silent work, the sleepless nights, the unseen tears. But he knew that words would fall short. "I do care," he said softly. "More than you realize." Her lips pressed together. Silence filled the room, stretching between them like an impassable chasm. Later that night, as David washed dishes, warm water running over his tired hands, he reflected on the life he had built quietly. Each sacrifice, each effort, each unremarked labor was part of his love for Clara. He had chosen silence over argument, peace over recognition, devotion over applause. Yet even in that quiet life, he wondered if she would ever see, if she would ever understand. Meanwhile, Clara moved about the house, unaware of the weight her assumptions carried. She saw his quietness as distance, his fatigue as neglect. She didn't notice the invisible victories he had won, the struggles he endured silently. Love, she believed, was loud and obvious. But David knew that true love often spoke in silence, in constancy, in invisible acts of endurance. That night, lie beside her in the quiet darkness, David closed his eyes. He carried hope that one day Clara would understand. He held on to belief that love, though silent, was enduring and unbreakable. And in the quiet rhythm of his heartbeat, he reminded himself that devotion, even when unseen, was never wasted. The house slept, oblivious to the unspoken truths it contained. And David, quiet as ever, carried on, steadfast and unwavering, the silent guardian of a love yet fully appreciated. The morning sunlight spilled into the bedroom, casting gentle rays across the walls, but it did little to illuminate the unspoken distance between David and Clara. He had already been awake for hours, as was his routine, listening to the faint hum of the city outside and the quiet stirrings of the house as it came alive. He moved through the small tasks of the morning with precision, adjusting bills, preparing breakfast, checking messages that hinted at problems he would face later in the day. Every action, every motion was measured, calculated, silent, a reflection of a life built on constant vigilance. Clara stirred from sleep, yawning and stretching, unaware of the weight David bore. To her, mornings were simple, predictable, and mostly about her own routines. She glanced at him, noticing the weariness etched on his face, but interpreting it as a lack of energy for life, for her, for them. "David," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "You're always so quiet. You never tell me what's going on." He turned, offering a small, patient smile. "I've been busy, Clara, just trying to get things done." She crossed her arms, frowning. "Busy? You always say that. But I don't see the results. I don't see the effort. I see you coming home late, sitting at the table without saying a word. Don't you care?" The question stung, though he hid it well. He wanted to tell her the nights he spent balancing deadlines, of the times he skipped lunch to handle emergency calls from work, of the endless hours spent ensuring their bills were paid and their home secure. But he knew these explanations would likely be dismissed as excuses. Instead, he simply nodded. "I care more than you know," he said softly, and returned to his quiet preparations. Claire didn't hear him, or perhaps she didn't want to. She left the room, muttering under her breath about his indifference. David watched her go, the silence of the house growing heavier around him. He felt a pang of sadness, not for himself, but for the growing disconnect between them. Each day, he gave everything he had, yet it seemed to vanish into the void of misunderstanding. As the day wore on, David moved through his responsibilities with quiet determination. He navigated meetings, responded to endless emails, and carried the constant weight of deadlines and obligations. Each task was performed with care, even when exhaustion threatened to overtake him. Yet all of this remained invisible to Clara. She saw the surface, the exterior, the moments when he appeared tired, distracted, or uncommunicative. She didn't see the hours of effort, the silent sacrifices, the tiny victories that kept their life afloat. By evening, David returned home tired but not defeated. He hoped for a moment of connection, a shared conversation that might bridge the widening gap between them. But as he entered the house, he was greeted not with warmth, but with subtle criticism. "You're late again," Clara said sharply, her words carrying more weight than she realized. "I had to finish something at work," he replied evenly, not wanting conflict, not wanting to fracture the fragile thread that still connected them. Clara shook her head, frustration in her eyes. "Work is always more important than us. Don't you see that?" David looked at her, searching for understanding, for even a small acknowledgement of his efforts. He found none, only disappointment, only the unspoken accusation that his care was insufficient, that his love had limits she could see and measure. And yet he did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply continued to do what he had always done. Worked silently, loved quietly, carried the burdens no one else could see. Later, as he sat alone in the dim light of the living room, David reflected on the invisible battles he fought daily. Life had taught him that love was not always loud, that devotion was not always recognized, and that sacrifice often remained unseen. And still he endured, because he believed that the true measure of love was not in recognition, but in the steadfastness of commitment. Meanwhile, Clara prepared for bed, unaware of the hidden struggles that had defined their lives for years. She lay down, frustrated, thinking of the quiet man beside her as distant, disengaged, and uninterested. She didn't realize that every task he completed, every late night at work, every silent sigh, was a testament to his devotion. As the house settled into darkness, David rose and quietly finished his remaining tasks. Bills were organized, emails sent, chores completed. Each act, though unseen, was a thread in the fabric of their shared life, a lifeline holding them together even as misunderstandings grew. And yet, in the quiet, David held on to hope. Hope that one day, Clara would see beyond her frustration. Hope that one day, she would recognize the love behind his silence. Hope that one day, the invisible battles he fought every day would finally be understood. But hope, like love, is tested most in silence, when recognition is absent and appreciation delayed. And so he endured, quietly, patiently, loving without expectation, giving without reward, carrying a life full of unseen sacrifices. The weekend arrived, but the rhythm of the house remained unchanged. Clara had imagined that Saturdays would be lighter, warmer, a reprieve from the constant grind of their routines. But the reality was different. David rose before dawn, as he always did, making sure everything was in order before the world awoke. The coffee was brewed, the newspaper carefully folded, and the small household tasks completed silently, without fanfare. Clara watched him from the doorway, noticing for the first time the quiet precision in his movements. She saw the weariness in his eyes, the stiffness in his shoulders, and the deep lines etched across his face. There was a weight to him she had never truly registered before, a gravity that spoke of responsibility and constant effort. "David, you look exhausted," she said softly, almost hesitantly. He glanced up, offering a faint smile. "I'm managing. Just a lot to do." Clara nodded, unsure of what to say next. She wanted to ask questions, to understand, but the words seemed inadequate, incapable of bridging the chasm of misunderstanding that had grown over the years. Instead, she retreated to the kitchen, preparing breakfast in silence, her mind churning with conflicting emotions. As the morning passed, small hints of his struggle began to surface. A stack of unpaid bills peeked out from the drawer, notes carefully written and pinned for reminders. A half-finished report lay on the table, evidence of late-night work and sleepless effort. A minor injury on his hand, barely noticeable, hinted at long hours spent repairing the broken hinge of the front gate. Each detail, subtle and easily overlooked, was a testament to the quiet battles David fought daily. Clara felt a twinge of guilt, a first stir of recognition. She realized that perhaps she had misjudged him, assuming that fatigue and quietness meant indifference. Perhaps the man who seemed so distant was actually carrying the weight of their life together on his shoulders, unseen and unacknowledged. But understanding was not immediate. Emotions tangled within her. Frustration, guilt, confusion, and a dawning realization that love and sacrifice were not always loud. She wanted to reach out, to acknowledge the effort, but fear held her back. Fear of overstepping, fear of admitting she had been wrong, fear that her recognition came too late. David noticed her quiet observation. He did not speak, for he had learned that love is often shown in action rather than words. He carried on with his tasks, fully aware of the small moments where Clara's gaze lingered longer than usual, where her expression softened, where her frustration ebbed into curiosity and concern. These were tiny victories, invisible to most, but to him, they mattered profoundly. Later that day, David suggested they go for a walk. Clara hesitated, but eventually agreed. As they walked through familiar streets, she observed him differently. Noticed the fatigue in his steps, the quiet attentiveness in his gestures, the way he paused to adjust her coat when a gust of wind blew. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet powerful. "David," she finally said, breaking the silence, I never realized how much you do." He looked at her, surprised but cautious. "What do you mean?" "I mean everything. The work, the responsibilities, the late nights, the little things, the things I never noticed before." Her voice trembled slightly. "I think I've been blind to it all." David's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that she was beginning to understand, and sorrow for the years lost in miscommunication and misperception. "It's okay," he said gently. "I never did it for recognition. I did it because I love you." Clara paused, absorbing his words. Love, silent, steadfast, unseen, had carried their life forward all these years. She felt the enormity of her previous misunderstanding, the weight of her assumptions, and a deep sense of regret. The walk continued in relative silence, not uncomfortable, but filled with a quiet intimacy. Clara began to see the depth of his commitment, the sacrifices made without complaint, the love expressed through action rather than words. For the first time in a long time, she felt connected to him, not through conversation, but through understanding, through observation, through the recognition of his invisible battles. By the time they returned home, the light had shifted. The house seemed warmer, quieter in a comforting way, as if acknowledging the subtle shift in their relationship. Clara knew this was only the beginning. That understanding alone was not enough. That acknowledgement had to be paired with action, with respect, with appreciation. That evening, she prepared dinner with care, watching David with renewed awareness. She noticed how tired he was, how his movements were deliberate, how even the simplest gestures carried the weight of effort. And she vowed, silently, to honor his sacrifices, to appreciate his love, to bridge the gap that had grown between them over the years. David, for his part, noticed a subtle change in her demeanor. He didn't ask for words of apology, didn't demand recognition. He simply continued to love, quietly, steadfastly, carrying on as he always had, knowing that the seeds of understanding had begun to take root. As night fell, Clara reflected on the day, on the small glimmers of truth she had seen. She realized that love is often quiet, sacrifice often invisible, and devotion often unacknowledged. Yet, in these moments of recognition, she understood the power of observation, the importance of empathy, and the slow but steady unfolding of comprehension. For the first time, she felt hope that their relationship could heal, that the silent love that had always been present could finally be recognized, cherished, and reciprocated. The following week, Clara began to see David in a new light. She noticed how he moved through the house quietly, completing tasks without complaint, often leaving no trace that he had even been there. The laundry neatly folded, the bills organized and paid on time, the small repairs done without fanfare. All these gestures, once invisible to her, now carried a weight of meaning she had never fully appreciated. It was late afternoon when she first realized the depth of his endurance. David had been working tirelessly in the study, the soft hum of his laptop filling the air. She watched him from the doorway, seeing the strain on his face, the fatigue in his posture, the subtle tension in his hands as he typed. There was a quiet determination in his movements, a steady rhythm born of years of sacrifice and responsibility. "David," she called softly, unsure whether to interrupt him. He looked up briefly, offering a tired but warm smile. "Yes, Clara? I just want to say thank you," she said, hesitating, "for everything, for all the things I never noticed." David's eyes softened, and he shook his head slightly. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I do these things because I love you. Always." Her heart tightened. How long had she been blind to this love? How many days, months, years had she mistaken his quiet endurance for indifference? The realization struck her like a sudden storm, leaving her both grateful and sorrowful. That evening, David suggested they take a walk to the small park near their home. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, the sun setting gently behind the trees. Clara noticed the way he moved, slowly, deliberately, conserving energy yet attending to every detail, adjusting his pace so she could walk comfortably beside him. Every gesture, no matter how small, spoke of thoughtfulness and care she had overlooked for so long. "David," she began, her voice trembling, I had no idea. I never realized how much you do, how much you carry on your own. All this time, I've been unfair." He stopped, turned to face her. "Clara, it's okay. I never did it for acknowledgement. I did it because I love you, because I want to give you a life that was safe and comfortable. That's all that matters." Her eyes filled with tears. "But I should have seen it. I should have appreciated it. I took so much for granted." David reached for her hand, holding it gently. "It's never too late to understand, Clara. Love, real love, grows stronger when it's recognized, when it's nurtured. And I know your heart is beginning to see what's always been here." They continued walking, the soft crunch of leaves under their feet matching the rhythm of their emotions. Clara felt a new appreciation for the quiet, steadfast love that had carried them through countless challenges. She realized that sacrifice was often invisible, that love was sometimes silent, and that understanding was a journey rather than an instant revelation. Back home, she began to notice the smaller things she had missed for so long. The way David brewed her coffee just the way she liked it, the way he quietly fixed the leaky faucet without complaint, the way he always remembered little details about her day. These acts, once mundane, now spoke volumes. They were expressions of devotion, of care, of a love that was steadfast and unwavering. That night, as they sat together in the living room, Clara reflected on the lessons she had learned. She understood that love was more than words, more than gestures meant to impress or please. True love was patience, endurance, and quiet acts of care. It was staying up late to ensure everything was in order, waking early to face unseen challenges, and continuing without complaint. She also understood the way of her own actions, the missed opportunities to express gratitude, the misunderstandings that had created distance between them. A profound sense of remorse settled over her, but alongside it came a determination, a desire to honor David's sacrifices, to acknowledge his efforts, to nurture the love that had been quietly sustaining them for so long. David, sensing her change, felt a quiet relief. He did not need grand gestures or dramatic apologies. He simply needed her recognition, her understanding, and the willingness to see him not just as a partner, but as a man who had given everything silently, tirelessly, without expectation of reward. And so, in that quiet evening, amidst the fading light and the calm of their home, Clara began to bridge the gap she had allowed to grow. She began to see, to understand, to feel the depth of David's devotion. And in doing so, she discovered the first true sense of intimacy they had shared in years. Not through words alone, but through acknowledgement, empathy, and the unspoken bond of love. The journey was only beginning. The road to full understanding, full appreciation, would take time. But the first steps had been taken, and Clara knew that she would never again take David's love for granted. The quiet acts of devotion, once overlooked, had finally begun to speak to her heart. The days following their evening walk brought subtle but profound changes to Clara. She found herself observing David in ways she had never allowed before. She noticed the quiet efficiency with which he handled chores, the patience he exhibited when small things went wrong, the meticulous attention he gave to details that she had always assumed were insignificant. Every small gesture carried a depth of care she had overlooked for so long. It was a Thursday morning when Clara fully realized how heavy David's burden had always been. She had overslept, rushing through her routine, and noticed him already awake, quietly preparing breakfast. His eyes were tired, a faint shadow underlined by weeks of sleepless effort. His hands moved skillfully, yet there was a fatigue in each motion that spoke of countless early mornings and late nights she had never seen. "David," she said softly, almost afraid to interrupt, "you're always doing so much." He glanced at her, smiling faintly, but his eyes betrayed weariness. "It's nothing you need to worry about," he said, though the truth was that it had cost him more than he could ever explain. Clara felt a pang of remorse. All those times she had criticized him for coming home late, for being quiet, for not appearing energetic enough. She realized now that she had been blind to the invisible struggles he carried. Every silent effort, every unspoken sacrifice had been his way of sustaining their life and ensuring her comfort. And she had never noticed. Later that day, she followed him to the study, where he had been working on a report for weeks. Piles of paperwork surrounded him, evidence of the long hours he had devoted to work, not for recognition, but to provide security for their family. She watched him pause occasionally, rubbing his temples, breathing deeply, yet continuing without complaint. Each motion, each gesture, carried a quiet devotion that demanded acknowledgement. I had no idea," she whispered, almost to herself. The words felt inadequate. How could she express years of misunderstanding in a single sentence? How could she begin to repay the silent love he had given so freely, so tirelessly? That evening, Clara decided to act differently. She prepared dinner with care, noticing how David's shoulders slumped with exhaustion, how his movements were slower than usual. She placed his favorite dish in front of him, touched his hand lightly, and said, "Thank you for everything you do. I see it now, and I want you to know I appreciate it." David looked at her, a mixture of surprise and relief in his eyes. "Clara, you don't have to thank me," he said softly. "I never did it for praise. I did it because I love you." Her throat tightened. "I know, but I need you to hear that I see you. I finally understand how much you've carried on your own. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all the times I doubted you, all the times I misunderstood you." The apology hung in the air, heavy yet cleansing. David's eyes softened, the faintest smile spreading across his lips. He reached for her hand, holding it with gentle reassurance. "It's okay, Clara. What matters is that we understand each other now. That's all that matters." The days that followed were different. Clara began to notice the subtle signs of his exhaustion and effort, acknowledging them openly and warmly. She made small gestures, preparing his favorite coffee in the morning, leaving encouraging notes, expressing gratitude for tasks he completed without complaint. And though David never sought recognition, these gestures filled the quiet corners of their home with warmth and understanding that had been absent for years. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Clara finally voiced the thoughts that had been building within her. "David, I've been blind for so long. I judged you unfairly, assumed things without understanding, and overlooked your sacrifices. But now I see everything, and I don't want to take it for granted again." David's voice was calm, steady, and filled with quiet love. "Clara, you don't need to carry guilt. All that matters is that we are here, together, understanding each other. Love is about patience, about endurance, about seeing each other beyond the surface. And now we do." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. The realization of her previous blindness weighed heavily on her, but alongside it came a sense of hope. Hope that the silent love that had sustained their life for years would now be recognized, cherished, and reciprocated. She had learned a valuable lesson, that true love is often invisible, sacrifice often unnoticed, and devotion often silent. But acknowledgement, understanding, and empathy could change everything. That night, as she lay beside him, Clara reflected on the journey of recognition she had begun. She realized that love is not only about giving but about understanding, about seeing the struggles of the other person, about embracing them fully. And she vowed to nurture that understanding, to honor the sacrifices that had always been made in silence, and to cherish the love that had quietly sustained them both for so long. David, sensing the subtle change in her, felt a quiet relief. The unspoken bond between them grew stronger, built not on grand gestures, but on acknowledgement, empathy, and the gentle understanding of each other's burdens. And in that quiet intimacy, they found a renewed sense of connection, a love deepened by the recognition of what had always been present, even when unseen. The weekend arrived, but the quiet in the house felt different now. Clara moved through the rooms with newfound awareness, noticing every subtle act of care David had performed for years, acts that had once gone unseen. The folded laundry, the carefully organized bills, the small repairs quietly completed. All of it now spoke a language of devotion she had finally begun to understand. It was late Saturday morning when the full weight of his sacrifice struck her. David had been up before dawn, as always, handling a work crisis that had left him exhausted the night before. She found him in the kitchen, rubbing his temples, eyes shadowed with fatigue, yet his hands moved with steady precision, preparing breakfast and packing notes for his ongoing responsibilities. "David," she whispered, almost afraid to disturb him. I don't know how you do all this." He looked at her, his face calm but tired. "It's just life, Clara. Someone has to handle it." "No, it's more than that," she said, her voice trembling. "It's every day, every hour, every little thing you do that I never saw, that I never appreciated. You carry so much for us, silently, without complaint, and I didn't notice. I was blind." David's gaze softened. He said nothing at first, simply continued his work, but Clara could see the truth in his eyes, a mixture of relief, weariness, and quiet endurance. As the morning passed, Clara observed him more closely. She noticed the tension in his shoulders, the subtle tremor in his hands as he completed tasks, the way he forced himself to smile when she offered a word of thanks. Every gesture carried not just physical effort, but emotional labor, the invisible weight of a man who had silently carried the burdens of life and love alike. By afternoon, Clara realized that mere acknowledgement was not enough. She had begun to understand the magnitude of his sacrifices, but seeing it firsthand demanded more than words. She needed to act, to participate, to share the weight rather than simply admire it from a distance. "David," she said, finally sitting beside him, "let me help. Let me share some of this. You've done so much, and I want to carry it with you, not just admire it." He paused, glancing at her with a mixture of surprise and tenderness. "Clara, it's not your burden to carry. I've chosen this for us." "I know," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "But love isn't just about giving silently. It's about partnership, about standing together. And I want to stand with you." The day passed with small acts of shared effort. Clara began handling some of the household chores with care, assisting him in organizing papers, tackling minor repairs, and even making his coffee exactly the way he liked it. It was a small shift, but it carried immense weight. In every shared task, every moment of attention, Clara began to see the full depth of what David had been sustaining alone for years. That evening, as they sat together quietly, Clara reflected on everything she had learned. Love, she realized, was not always obvious. Sacrifice could go unnoticed for years. Devotion could remain silent, hidden in the shadows of routine and responsibility. And yet in all of it, David had endured tirelessly because his love had been unwavering. "I'm so sorry, David," she whispered, her voice trembling, "for all the times I misjudged you, all the times I assumed you didn't care. I understand now. I see you. I see everything you've carried for us, and I will never take it for granted again." David reached for her hand, holding it gently. "Clara, you don't need to apologize. What matters is that you understand now, that we share this life together, with awareness, with care, with love. That's all that matters." For the first time in years, Clara felt the full depth of his love, not just in words, but in action, in endurance, in the quiet sacrifice that had shaped their life together. She realized that the man she had once thought distant had, in truth, been the foundation of everything she had ever relied on. That night, as they lay in bed, Clara rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart. She knew that the road ahead would require continued awareness, continued effort, and continued gratitude. But she also knew that she would never again take his love for granted. The invisible weight he had carried had finally been seen, and in seeing it, she had discovered the true measure of devotion. David, sensing the shift, felt a quiet relief. His silent love, once invisible and unacknowledged, had finally been recognized. And in that recognition, a profound intimacy grew, a bond built not on words alone, but on shared understanding, empathy, and the acknowledgement of sacrifice. The journey had not been easy, but the reward was worth every unspoken effort, every silent struggle. For Clara, understanding David's love in its entirety was a lesson in humility, empathy, and the enduring power of quiet devotion. And for David, the recognition was a balm to his years of silent endurance, a reminder that love, though often unspoken, could finally be understood, cherished, and reciprocated. The morning light filtered gently through the curtains, painting the room in warm shades of gold. Clara woke, feeling a calm she had not known in years. The weight of misunderstanding, of assumptions, of unspoken frustrations had finally begun to lift. She turned to see David, already awake, quietly preparing coffee. The faint shadows under his eyes reminded her of the long nights and early mornings he had silently endured, and for the first time, she truly appreciated every ounce of effort, every act of devotion she had once overlooked. "Good morning," she whispered, her voice soft with tenderness. David looked up, a small smile forming on his lips. "Morning," he replied. Though his voice was calm, she could sense the quiet warmth behind it, the endurance, the love, the patience that had sustained them for so long. She reached out, touching his hand gently. I want you to know I see you now, David. I see everything you've carried for us all these years. And I want to honor it, to share it, and to never take it for granted again." David's eyes softened, reflecting the relief and quiet happiness he had long yearned for. "Clara, that means more than you know. You don't have to do anything grand. Just understanding, just seeing the love that's been here all along, that's enough." The day unfolded differently than any before. Clara moved through the house with attention and care, observing the small details of David's life. His meticulous organization, the quiet way he handled responsibilities, the gentle consideration with which he approached even the simplest tasks. She began assisting without being asked, noticing how he relaxed when he no longer bore the weight alone. For the first time in years, their home felt truly like a partnership. Every shared chore, every mutual effort, every acknowledgement of effort built a stronger bond between them. Clara had learned that love was not only about words or moments of affection. It was also about the quiet endurance, the unseen sacrifice, and the patient devotion that often goes unnoticed. That evening, As they sat together in the living room, Clara reflected on the journey she had taken, from misunderstanding to recognition, from judgment to empathy, from distance to intimacy. She realized that true love often requires observation, patience, and a willingness to see beyond the surface. It demands awareness of the silent burdens the other carries, and gratitude for efforts made without expectation. "David," she said softly, "I've learned so much. I've learned that love isn't always loud, that sacrifice often goes unseen, and that devotion, true devotion, doesn't need applause to be real." David took her hand in his, holding it gently, his voice calm and steady. "Clara, all I ever wanted was to love you, to care for you, to support you. And now, knowing that you see it, it's enough. We finally found each other in understanding." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, not from sorrow but from relief and deep appreciation. She realized that the years of misunderstanding had been painful, but they had also been instructive. They had taught her empathy, humility, and the importance of observation, and they had revealed the enduring power of quiet, steadfast love, the kind that carries life forward even when unrecognized. The days that followed continued in this new rhythm of understanding. Clara and David worked side by side, sharing responsibilities, acknowledging each other's efforts, and appreciating the love that had been present all along. Their conversations became gentler, more patient, more intentional. Silence was no longer a source of frustration. It was a space for reflection, appreciation, and quiet intimacy. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Clara paused and looked at David. "You've given so much," she said softly, "and I want to give back. Not just now, but always. To honor you, to love you fully, and to never forget what you've carried all these years." David smiled, a quiet, contented smile that spoke of relief, of love, and of peace. "Clara, that's all I've ever wanted. To be seen, to be understood, and be loved in return. And now I am." As they sat down to eat, the warm light of the evening bathing the room, Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude. She understood now that love is not measured by grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but by patience, endurance, and quiet devotion. And she knew that the man beside her had embodied that love fully, unwaveringly, silently, for all the years they had shared together. In that moment, Clara realized a true lesson of their journey. The greatest acts of love are often invisible, the deepest sacrifices often unnoticed, and the most enduring devotion often silent. But recognition, understanding, and empathy have the power to transform life, to heal old wounds, and to create bonds that withstand the trials of time. And as David reached for her hand, holding it firmly yet gently, Clara knew that their love, tested by misunderstanding, strengthened by recognition, and deepened by empathy, had finally come full circle. She had learned to see him, to appreciate him, and to love him not just for who he was, but for all he had silently given. And in that quiet, steady moment, surrounded by the life they had built together, they both understood love is not always loud, but when it is recognized and cherished, it can move mountains, heal hearts, and endure forever.